I've done this 1,000 times, but I guess the technology didn't matter.
Let me get to. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yep.
So I can be the controller of the PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you, Kathryn. Well, I see it is 11:02. So I would love to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to our first full steering committee meeting of the Children's Trust of Alachua County. So glad everybody could join us. I don't know if everyone had a chance to see the agenda, but it was posted online. And the first piece we need to start with is a roll call. Because this is our first meeting as a whole group, when your name is called, I would love for you to pop up and at least introduce yourself and just give a brief discussion of who you are and if you work or where you work, that kind of thing, but just a brief introduction of yourself. So I'll go down the list. Is Member Cornell on? Ken Cornell?
I don't see him yet.
Okay, we'll come back and see if he joins us. Member Snyder?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Member Lee is here.
Okay, Member Pinkelson?
Hi, I'm here.
You want to introduce yourself?
Introduce myself. I'm with the Children's Trust and look forward to working through this. I think with what happened yesterday in Texas, that this just drives home how important what we're doing is, and that we need to come up with, do as many things as we can to change make the generational changes that are necessary with our children nowadays. So this is important stuff, and I look forward to participating. Thanks.
Thank you. Barzella Papa?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Barzella Papa. I'm the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of North Central Florida, and I've served in that capacity now coming up on 16 years this summer. The foundation, we currently manage, well, don't ask me right now because of the market, but we currently manage about 25 million in charitable funds and another 20 to 25 million in planned gifts. And we oversee the distribution of between 4 to 5 million a year in grants benefiting our local nonprofit sector. So we actually, I think I shared with Christy and some others, we've actually been in the process this year of doing our first major formal strategic plan at the Community Foundation. So I'm excited to be here and share insights and kind of what we've learned going through our process as well. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Bishop Chris Stokes.
Good morning. My name is Bishop Chris Stokes, and I am the Executive Director of the Willie Mae Stokes Community Center here in Micanopy. I am also the Senior Pastor of the New Beginning Christian Worship Center here in Micanopy as well. And we are working for the last 4 years. We have been working to provide services to the Micanopy area, summer camps, food programs, and I would agree with the statement that was earlier said that in lieu of what has happened yesterday and the attacks that our young people are under, that this is a important area for us to address, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. Candace King.
Good morning. My name is Candace King. I'm retired. And most recently, I was the executive director of Acorn Clinic for about 10 years. And that is a rural health clinic in the northern part of the county. So Pastor Stokes, Acorn is in the opposite direction of Micanopy. So maybe we've got the north and south represented anyway. I also have, which you may or may not know, I have a background in research methodology, including things like surveys, focus groups, not town halls, but group meetings, and have also participated in strategic planning in the past in several organizations. So, and I was also the chair of the Alachua County Children's Alliance a number of years ago for a number of years. Cheryl, maybe you can remember, I'm blanking on the name of the fellow that was the chair of a partnership before Steve Pennypacker. He went to
It was
Pensacola,
Sean Salamita. Yes.
Yeah. So so Sean had chaired the Children's Alliance, and then Sadie Darnell, or actually I think it was Sadie, then Sean, then me for a while. So I'm glad to be here. I think there certainly is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm happy to be a small part of it. Thank you, Candace. Christy Arrington.
Good morning. I am the executive director of Girls Place here in Gainesville. I have the privilege of serving about 400 girls a year in year-round programming, and we have support from the Trust with our after-school program and summer day camp and capacity building, and our other programs, which are equally as meaningful. Achieve is a year-round academic program, and Brain Power is an on-site mental health program for our girls and our families.
Thank you. And did Commissioner Cornell join us?
Hey, Madam Chair. Yes, Ken Cornell here. I know most, if not all of you, really honored to be joining each of you to hear your thoughts about how we, as Lee said, kind of improve generational poverty and also provide every kid with an opportunity to succeed. So I'm your county commissioner, and I serve as appointee on the Children's Trust, and am glad to be associated with each of you during this project. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And did Dr. Snyder join us?
Yes, I'm here, Cheryl. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pat Snyder. I'm a member of the Children's Trust Board, and I direct the Anita Zucker Center for Excellence in Early Childhood Studies here at the University of Florida. I've lived in Gainesville and Alachua County since 2007 and have been involved in a variety of initiatives focused on comprehensive early learning systems to support young children and their families in the context of their communities. It's nice to meet those of you who I don't know. Most everybody I do know. So nice to meet you, Bishop Stokes. And welcome.
Thank you. And I'll introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Cheryl Twombly. I have had the honor of being selected to chair this committee, which I'm very excited to do. I'm also a board member of the Children's Trust, and my regular job is I work full-time for Department of Children and Families. I've been with the department for 33 years now, and I'm just excited to see what we can do reaching out to our communities and really hearing what they have to say and incorporating their voice into what we do at the Children's Trust. So I appreciate everybody joining us. It looks like we have a full quorum, so that's exciting. I would like to let Dr. Kathryn Raymond also introduce herself. She is working with us as she's going to be facilitating many of our meetings coming up. Kathryn, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Kathryn Raymond. I'm based in Miami, Florida, and I have done quite a bit of work with children's services councils, very much so in Miami-Dade, but also the Florida Children's Council and other children's services councils. So I'm looking forward to working with you all. I will be facilitating the strategic planning process. So the community listening piece is kind of the front end of that. So I'm just kind of sitting here as a listening, because I want to make sure that we're get everything we need from a strategic planning point. And then during today's meeting, I'll talk a little bit about a proposed timeline for the strategic planning. But I'm really looking forward to working with everyone. In February, I had the good fortune to do a half-day board retreat. So I have met the board members, but the other members of the steering committee, I am looking forward to working with you. So off we go.
Here we go. Thank you. So you're all looking at the agenda. This was posted on the CTAC website. The one thing I would like to add in addition to the review of the ITN under our discussion items is I'd like to add a brief overview of the sunshine rules for this group, just so we're getting off on the right foot. The CTAC board's charge for the steering committee, and then just an overview of our meeting schedule and timelines that have been kind of tentatively put into place. So with those additions, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, well, let's start off with the fun stuff. Most of you probably understand the sunshine rule, but we asked Attorney Bob Swain to come and just kind of give us an overview, just so that we're all on the same page as we move forward. We don't break any of the rules. So Bob, if you want to take it away and give us a little overview of what we can and can't do, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Bob Swain. I'm with the County Attorney's Office. I'm going to compress a minimum of an hour's presentation down to 5 minutes. So there are huge gaps that will have to be filled elsewhere. Since this is a virtual meeting, I will tell you off the bat, you have already violated the sunshine law. You held a vote virtually. You can't do that. You have to have a quorum present in the same room physically in order to have to conduct business at a sunshine meeting. You can conduct a workshop, which is basically what you're doing, but you do not conduct business at the workshop. You simply discuss. The public is invited to these meetings as well because it's a sunshine meeting, so it has to be noticed to the public. The public has to be able to come in and view. It is not necessary during workshop meetings to take public comment. You can. It is not necessary. As long as public comment has to be taken at some point prior to a decision being made or within a reasonable time of the decision being made. Some boards will take public comment at the end of the meeting after the decisions have been made, but the law has been interpreted to say, well, you could always go back and change what you have done. The nub of the sunshine law is no two members of the same deliberative body, collegial body, may discuss things that are likely to come before that collegial body without it being a noticed public meeting. So, and that is whether it's by email, text, phone, correspondence, or running into someone at the grocery store. That does not stop you from talking to them about anything else other than what may be coming before this committee. For example, you've got some members of the CTAC who are on this committee. And there may be people who are on this committee who are not members of the CTAC, who, if they run into one of the CTAC members in the grocery store, might want to bend their ears about a particular contract or vendor. That is not a violation of the sunshine law because you are not going to be issuing contracts. But if you talk about such matters as strategic planning, the goals and that sort of thing, that is probably a violation of the sunshine law. The staff is able to talk to individuals outside the sunshine because they are not members of the sunshine body. They are staff. So your facilitator can talk one-on-one because she doesn't have a vote. CTAC staff can talk one-on-one because they don't have a vote. What they can't do is get, 2 or 3 of you on the phone and talk about issues unless it has been noticed. Now, you can notice a meeting of 2 people, and it happens. Occasionally, there'll be a couple of members of any given board that want to talk about things between themselves. And so that will be a noticed public meeting to take place in a public building at a certain time and place where the public can come in. That's the other thing about the sunshine rule. It requires that the meetings be held in a public building. That means one that is accessible to the public and where there will be no psychological barrier to people entering that building. So you would not want it in a members only club that discriminates on the basis of whatever to become a member, if that erects a psychological barrier. Working lunches at restaurants often will be one of those things that raise issues. There is nothing that's directly in the Sunshine Law that prevents members of this committee who are not members of the CTAC to going to CTAC meetings and speaking on matters that might come before this board. I will tell you it's bad form, but that is a noticed public meeting. The public can see what's going on. But I would say that if you want to attend one of those meetings and you intend on discussing anything that's coming before this body, you have it noticed that, you know, you're going to be in attendance, or members of this body will be in attendance at that meeting. It is cleaner and it just won't get you in trouble that way. There is a way, if you violate the Sunshine Law inadvertently, there is a way to cure that. And you cure that by at the next meeting purging the violation, which if something was held outside the sunshine, you then at the next meeting announce that something was done outside the sunshine, and you start from scratch. So if a vote was taken outside the sunshine for some reason, that vote becomes null, and you start from scratch. You have your discussion out in the open, and you go forward from there. That takes care of the organization's sunshine violation. It does not take care of the individual sunshine violation, and there are criminal penalties associated with sunshine law violations. I would not worry about voting on the agenda today as one of those violations, though. I didn't mean to scare anyone, but that's just an example of what you get into with the sunshine law. In order to
Question?
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question?
certainly, sir.
So when you say, I thought with regards to the law for taking action, that a board had to have a majority in person in order for the board to take action. That I thought was different than a violation of the Sunshine Law. I thought that was actually a statute that said no action taken without a majority of the quorum is a meaningful action. Is it actually a violation, or is it just the action, like we don't have an adopted agenda because we're not in person?
Well, that is the Sunshine Law. That's part of the Sunshine Law, that you can't conduct business without a quorum being present.
I thought you could conduct business, you just could not take action.
Well, conducting business is taking action. You can listen. That's not conducting business. You can't vote on anything. You know, you
Well, no,
cannot.
we can have this discussion, like we're having a discussion now, we're listening to you, we're going to talk to each other, but we're not taking any official action.
Right. That's a workshopping, and
Right.
workshopping is perfectly fine. And this is a sunshine meeting in that the public is here. So it is not a problem in this context because the public is here. They can hear what you're doing, but you can't take any action. If the public wasn't here, if this was not open to the public, that would be a violation of the Sunshine Law, whether or not you took any votes. So,
Understood. So to cure that vote, I mean, this is a good example that we're using. So to cure this vote, the chair can say, okay, we took action, that action's null and void, we're having a workshop. Done, cured.
yes,
Okay.
here's the agenda I prepared. You know,
Yep.
this is, does anyone else see something that we need to put on the agenda for discussion? Because the key today is nothing but discussion.
Thank you. I'll let you continue.
There are narrow exceptions to conducting business in person. That is where you start the meeting in person with a quorum, but someone, because of extraordinary circumstances, cannot make that meeting. You can allow them to participate remotely. That has to be done by motion of quorum, the people who are in attendance, and has to carry by a majority of the quorum present. And extraordinary doesn't mean, well, they just didn't make the meeting. It means, you know, they're in the hospital, they're got called away unexpectedly, and the board has to be given that reason, the committee has to be given that reason, and then find that that is an extraordinary reason and allow the person to participate by taking a vote. Generally, if all you're doing is speaking to the group, that is not seen as full participation in the meeting. It's seen as speaking on matters pretty much like the public would, but enhanced because you're a member of the body. That is a thumbnail. I did not cover a lot of the territory, but that much will keep you out of trouble on the Sunshine Law. On the Public Records Law, I'll just say to those who are not familiar with it, any documents that you get that are not received through the trust's mail server or directly through the trust are considered public records. Obviously, the stuff through the trust is public record, but they're the records custodians of those things. So if you get emails from third parties about this, if you send emails to third parties about this, those are public records. And if you do not share them with staff so they can get them on their mail server or get them scanned into their system, you are the records custodian for that. And all the pressure of the Public Records Law for retention will fall on you. So please, 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 anything you get that's outside the CTAX mail server, share with staff so they can stay the records custodian.
Bob, Candace had a question. She put in the chat, does Sunshine contact apply to Kathryn Raymond since she is a contracted vendor? In other words, can she be considered staff? Well,
no, and that's what I called her, the facilitator. But no, she is not a member of this committee. She is, if she is an official member of this committee, then certainly that's a problem. She cannot do one-on-one. But she is, in her role as facilitator, she is basically staffing the committee. And so she's allowed to work outside the Sunshine. Now,
So that is exactly what I asked. So in other words, we can talk to her.
Yes. One
Okay,
final,
that's all I needed to know.
what she can't do is she cannot say to Commissioner Cornell, Candace is thinking this. She cannot be a conduit for information outside the Sunshine. She can get the sense of people and how they feel. So she'll know what's going on, but she cannot really let them know what the sense of that, let the individual members know what the general sense of the group is. That's called conduiting, and that's not legal.
Well, I absolutely undo the vote to approve the agenda. That was, I was just testing you, Bob. I knew that, really, I did.
I knew, I understand. And you know, I just use it as a teaching moment because that gets done all the time.
Okay.
And it's usually not a big deal. But it gave me a great in to discuss the Sunshine Law. So that's all.
Glad I could
So
be that example.
I
Go ahead.
so move.
I unso second.
Bob, one question. So the work we're doing today, I worked with Christy and Kathryn alone to work on the ITN and the scope. And so that's not been discussed. It's planned to be discussed today and get comments and input from the group. Is it okay that we're workshopping that and incorporating their discussion? We just will not move to approve for a final draft. That would be something that
Right.
would have to happen in an in-person meeting.
Right, that would have to be in person, or, I mean, you could even take that, you could take that to the CTAC board and say, we workshopped this, there wasn't a vote, but the general unvoted consensus was these were the areas of most interest. But if this board is going to take, this committee is going to take any action, it has to have a physical quorum in one place to do so at a noticed location, time, and place.
Okay, very good. So that helps us as far as we can go ahead and get this draft where we want it, and then we will just present it to the board and let them make the decision in the end.
Yes, and workshops are perfect for this sort of thing. So,
Okay.
I mean, the fact that you're doing it virtually, there's no harm to it. Just don't try to approve it and take official action. You can just get everyone's input so that, you know, you pretty much have a good idea. Well, everyone tells you that they'd support that, they'd support that, they'd support that. That's different than taking a vote. They're just letting you know in public that they support that.
Perfect. Anybody else have any questions? Well,
This
thank
is Candace. This is
Go ahead.
Candace again. I'm sorry to interrupt. I've been involved in something very similar to this for the last, 5 months. And we ended up having lots of documents that were being reviewed by subcommittee members. And how we were able to work, given that it was really a problem that we couldn't talk to each other, is that we sent these comments to a staff member who would then disseminate the next draft, for example, or version to the whole group. So that's one of the reasons I was asking about Kathryn Raymond, is that, are we able to send things to her? Or
Yeah.
who is it? Because in an hour, we're not going to get through all of our comments. So there's going to have to be some capability to pass things on.
Yes.
If I may, I would, sorry, yes, as Bob stated, yes, you can do that. But Candace, I would also suggest that you send those items to me, since I'll be in direct contact with Kathryn and or Cheryl separately. So
Yeah,
you
that's
should.
good. I just needed to know who that would be. And Christy,
It
that's
would be
awesome
me.
that
Yeah.
you're the person. Okay, thank you.
Boards will often share their individual, members of boards will often share their individual comments with staff, who will then bring back to the board an improved document. Now, I will tell you, those individual comments become public record.
Very good. And I think using Christy to send things through, she's kind of the keeper of this document. So that way we're officially getting it in the CTAC records. I do not want to be the custodian. So any other questions for Bob? Okay, thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You as well. The next item we wanted to discuss quickly, and again, we want to spend most of the time on the ITN. I didn't know if everyone has had the opportunity or been following the board packets, but the charge of the steering committee has been included in several of the board packets, and just wanted to see if anybody had any questions. This is the basic synopsis of what we've been asked to accomplish. Proposing a mechanism for updating the needs assessment. That's really what we're doing with the listening project. Address the following issues discussed at the board retreat, which includes how to best allocate CTAC funds, the conceptual framework and theory of change, what role should the CTAC play in coordinating, collaborating with other public agencies? Should we serve as a backbone organization for collective impact? All of these are questions that the board as a whole put together, and really wanted this core group to begin working through them. And this will be part of the process. Again, we're starting with this listening project because we're going to allow this to really drive what we do moving forward. And it's going to be the voice of the community as we look at strategic planning, how we want to move forward allocating funds, what our focus should be as a board, what we're going to recommend to that board. So any questions on the charge that we have as a group? Okay. Nothing to approve there. So the next item we wanted to also quickly discuss is our timelines. And Kathryn, I'm going to let you discuss this as far as our meeting schedule and kind of the benchmarks that we're going to try to meet through this project work.
Super, thank you. I'd like to preface this by saying frequently when I do strategic planning, I work with a steering committee, and to kind of build on the prior slide, one of the roles of the steering committee is to do some of that initial kind of heavy lifting of reviewing, reflecting, generating ideas, discussing them, trying to shape some then ideas that are in a draft form to share with the full board for their discussion and decision making. So we're kind of queuing things up for the full board. And I find that the process is just much more efficient. Nothing we do, obviously, as Bob said, rules out any decisions the board would make, but we just help kind of prepare things so that that process is a little more efficient. So what you have in front of you is a tentative proposed, we're going to call it a workshop schedule. I'm going to rename them. They are not meetings, they are workshops. And obviously this is going to change a little bit based on, I think, how the community listening project rolls out. We've already made some changes to accommodate, hopefully, an assertive schedule for that. There's not a lot that we want to do before the results of that community listening come in, but before they do come in, we can certainly be looking at the review of updated kind of secondary data. What are the data trends? Bonnie and Christy and staff are updating those. We can also look at what other children's services councils throughout the state are doing. So there's some preliminary things that we can be looking at while the community listening project is underway. And I've put it together as a mix of shorter virtual meetings, and then several half-day longer meetings to just, accommodate schedules and logistics and things like that. So I don't know if people have comments, if you've had a chance to take a look at this. For some of you, I think it's the first time you may be seeing it. But we will start, let me just take a minute to overview, and then if people have comments, we will anticipate either early September or end of August, we'll kind of have our first half-day session, and then we'll kind of rotate between virtual and in-person, with really things kind of heating up in terms of our work beginning in November, when I'm hoping we can get some initial findings reported from the contractor on the community listening. And then with the goal that there is actually a draft of the plan in February for the board to review, and some final approval in March. I see a few hands up. I'm going to start with Candace and then go to Ken and Lee for questions.
So actually, I have a comment. It's not so much a question. Well, maybe there is a question here. I'm not sure what staff environmental scan activities means, but we don't need to go into that right this minute, but it would be helpful to know what that means. Also, I feel like, in my opinion, that it would be important early on for this group to review some of the past work that's been done. And that's identified pretty well in the history portion of the website. So for example, there was a needs assessment done by Well Florida back in 2018. I think we should look at that. I mean, not only in terms of the information, but also the methodology they use, because they did have a public facing data gathering aspect. Likewise, maybe actually that was 2016. In 2018, there was also a polling project done that came up with some important findings in a process. So early on, I would think, and it may even impact, frankly, what the vendor that's selected for the IT for this project should look at. Part of that is that work, I would say, is at least partially considered a baseline. It certainly is. A lot of effort went into it. So those are my two comments. I think that's, in other words, I think that's missing from this timeline. Maybe you consider that staff environmental scan, although I suspect that's more current.
So I'm going to respond to Candace and then go on to Ken and then Lee. Thank you, Candace. So I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure that maybe I was using an inside baseball term there, and I will not do that. I apologize for that. What Bonnie and Bonnie, you can add anything in if you want after I speak on this. Bonnie and staff are going back and actually going, I think, back to those initial documents that you referenced, Candace, and doing some updating on what the new, updates on the data trends from publicly available data. And so that's kind of, they're looking at the environmental scan is kind of looking at what's happening in the CTAX environment. And there's two pieces of that, right? There's the talking to people, which is going to be this community listening project, and then going and looking at the publicly available data and seeing what story that tells. So that's what I'm calling the staff side of this environmental scan, is they're looking at that publicly available data. And absolutely, we need to include in what this committee is doing is going back and looking at these other kind of baseline documents. So thank you for making sure that is included in the process. Bonnie, do you want to say anything else about what you all are doing?
Basically, what we've been trying to keep up to date with is those 15 indicators that were selected as a result of that initial advisory committee. So that's something that we've been keeping up with. I wasn't aware of doing anything more in depth beyond that. So I'm learning about that now.
Good, okay. So one of the things that this committee will be bringing to me and staff is what other data you would like to see. And then we will make sure we get those data so that we can feed that into the process. So Candace, I hope that clarifies a few things for you, and thank you for mentioning those baseline reports. Ken and then Lee.
Thank you. So this is really, I guess, for Pastor Stokes, Barzella, Christy, Candace, and Mia. When we kind of laid this timeline out, our thought here was that it would be heavily focused on listening on the front end, really listening. But the reason we're trying to end by March is that leads us right into the next year's budget cycle so that we can actually implement. We talk about on many boards what's what we all think is important, but we fund the community priorities. And so I think the goal of this timeline, at least from my perspective, with getting a final plan presented for approval to the board, is that we can actually incorporate what we come up with actually funding in a short and long-term basis.
Thank you, Ken. Lee?
Thank you. Thank y'all for supplying the background information with other counties and what they did, but it looks like in their listening tours, and I don't know whether this goes into right now or later conversation, but it looks like they took about up to 8 months, both Hillsborough and Broward took like 8 months to do their listening tours. By the time, going out to the public and then returning something back to the board. Ours is 2 months. So is that problematic? Are we going to be able to get the information that we need in a 2-month period of time? Which, and I understand exactly what I believe said the same thing at the meeting the other day about we're trying to get this information for our next budget term. But we want to make sure that the information that we get is complete in order so that we get, we implement the right strategies for the budget. And I'm wondering, questioning whether or not 2 months is enough time to do what we want to do. So I'm throwing that out for discussion.
I think that's a really good point, and Christy and Cheryl and I really struggled with it. It's actually 4 months, right? From contract start to finish. The data collection we have is 2 months. I think if Lee, if you don't mind holding that for 1 second, I think the next thing we're going to do is actually talk about the ITN draft. And I think that let's hold it to that, because I think that's a really valid point, and this group can, discuss what you all want to do and the implications of that. Absolutely. So let's hold that. I see Candace has another question, and then we might be able to be ready to move on to him.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with Lee. I understand that you guys want to have an assertive schedule, but in my experience, and I've been on both sides of this is really aggressive. And I agree with Lee as well that I believe that it will impact the quality of the work, simply because when you do this kind of work, when you're reaching out to the public, it's not your timeline. Many times it's their timeline when they can get people together, et cetera. So, I think that that's a pretty serious discussion that in order for this to be effective in the ITN.
Okay, good. Nope, I think it's a really valid point. Let's see, are there any other questions other than related to that part of the scheduling about the workshop schedule? Obviously, that's why this is still tentative, right? Because it really hinges on this ITN. If not, I would like us to pass it back to Cheryl so we can move on to discussing the ITN. Cheryl?
Okay, thank you, Kathryn. Okay, so let's go ahead and I know it wasn't given to you all until I think Monday, but hopefully you've had a chance to look at the ITN. It was embedded in that group of documents that was sent out that included other projects from other children's services boards. We wanted to give them as examples just of other projects that have been done, and then also as well as what we put together. So Christy, if you want to kind of lead this discussion on what you've got in the ITN and any comments you have.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So within the ITN that we provided to everyone, the scope of services, which is attachment A, if you are looking at this document electronically in the Word format, it is page 30. Which is right after the last page of the actual sample contract. And so within that scope of service, it talks about or details the purpose and introduction. And as we've discussed already, we are seeking a contractor to conduct the community listening project. The project will be used by CTAC to identify and characterize ways to support Alachua County's children and determine how CTAC resources can be used. It also details that the overall use of the listening project will be to identify and focus on what those efforts, those priority issues impacting children birth to 18, support the development of a system map, develop an overarching framework and key strategies to address the priority issues, and then develop the strategic plan for use of the CTAC funds. Within the scope of service, and I don't want to review the entire thing, so I'm hoping you guys had an opportunity to review it, so I do want to just hit on a few areas of that scope of service and then hit on a few important areas within the ITN as well. So within that scope of service, it highlights the information gathered from target populations, and we provide a sample list of what those questions and topics that the trust would like to see addressed in those listening, in that listening project. So some sample questions that they've highlighted to go over in that listening project is, do you like the indicators that CTAC used? What gaps exist in terms of available services as well as the population served? What are the most important issues that families, children, community stakeholders are concerned about? We want to look at the barriers, what supports would make things better for families, what else we should be talking about, what would improve the quality of life for families and their children throughout Alachua County. We intend to include various stakeholders within the listening projects. So for an example, parents and caregivers, children, service providers, whether they are current CTAC funded providers, potential funded providers, nonprofit, public for-profit partners, as well as key community leaders. For an example, Gainesville for All, pediatricians, faith groups, and other funders as well. In developing the plan to collect data, we are hoping that the following would be considered: birth to 5, early elementary, late elementary, middle school, high school adults. We are, when we look at the area, we want to ensure that the rural and urban areas are covered. And we definitely want to pay attention to the vulnerable populations, immigrants, victims of domestic violence, those with housing insecurity, those with juvenile justice involvement, pregnant women, new mothers, as well as special needs. There's an area in there that details the data collection and how we would want the vendor to ensure that a number of data collection methods are used, such as surveys, interviews, focus groups, community meetings. We've heard from organizations that talk about the population that is extremely concerned about safety, and how this vendor will need to ensure that they find creative ways to get feedback from community residents that are victims of domestic violence. And that might include working with agencies that are working directly with them and not interviewing those individuals directly. So just making sure that the vendor understands that we intend to have them use various methods to collect that data. Then also we detailed a timeline which Kathryn, using the tool that Kathryn reviewed, we utilized that to create the timeline within the scope of service as well. And the deliverables she mentioned also, with the initial findings, executive summary, and report, comprehensive report that will be presented to the committee as well as the board. So that is a quick summary of the scope of service. That scope of service was utilized to create the final invitation to negotiate. And what I want to bring your attention to really quickly in the invitation to negotiate, the third page, it's where we have that timeline. And it's our intention to release the invitation to negotiate June 17th. Which means it would be included in the board packet for the CTAC board that would go out June 6th, and they would discuss it and review it at the actual meeting June 3rd, and I'm sorry, June 13th, and that's where we would be looking for approval. If released on the 17th, similar to all of our other funding opportunities, there will be a bidders conference, an opportunity for them to just mainly ask any clarifying questions that they have about the funding opportunity, as well as submitting questions to CTAC as it relates to the invitation to negotiate. We have a due date, a tentative due date for this funding opportunity being July 8th, with a review period taking place July 11th through the 13th, and then interviews July 14th through the 15th. The recommendation, the funding recommendation from the review team would be submitted to the board for the July 18th board packet and reviewed and approved by the board Monday, July 25th. In section 2 of the invitation to negotiate, I want to bring your attention to the evaluation criteria. During that evaluation criteria is where we are within that evaluation criteria, it's the proposal will be reviewed against certain areas. So the past record of past experience, the project plan, as well as if they're going to include the system mapping, which is optional. I want to stop here for a second to see if Ashley can pull up that invitation to negotiate so that you guys can follow along electronically as well.
I can pull it up. I can just stop sharing the, if Ashley's got it right. I'm going to close my share screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that invitation page, Ashley, is going to be page 4, I believe, of the invitation to negotiate. Keep going for me. Right there. Thank you. So there you will find how the review team will score the certain areas based on what the applicant submits to the CTAC. Again, record of past experience. So based on their experience with similar projects, whether they have sound knowledge of community input and data collection protocols, as well as any references that they submit along with their proposal. Under project plan, based on the contractor's plan to accomplish the task based on the scope of services, and then their proposed staffing, deployment, and qualified personnel for organization. System mapping is also included in this invitation to negotiate as an optional section of or component of this invitation to negotiate. Ashley, if you'll go ahead and go to the next page and keep going until you get to the review area, which is number 5. Where it has the scoring range and the scoring description. Thank you. After final scores are provided through the review team, what we'll be looking at and how we determine the which submission would move forward for recommendation is based on the final score. 90 to 100 meets or significantly exceeds all of CTAC's requirements. 80 to 89 meets all and exceeds several of CTAC requirements. 70 to 79 meets minimum CTAC requirements or does not meet CTAC requirements at all. Within the CTAC invitation to negotiate, like other funding opportunities, everyone has requirements based on page numbers, cover letters, and so all of that is detailed within the ITN, which is standard language of the invitation to negotiate. I will stop there, and Ashley, if you can go back to the scope of services, which again is page 30 of the electronic copy, and I'll stop there to find out if there are any other questions and pass it back to Chair Twombly. And we can make edits, as I mentioned earlier, Chair Twombly, as it relates to any changes that the committee is interested in.
Okay, and I see a couple people had comments. If you wanted to go ahead, Lee, I see your hand is up.
You're muted, Lee.
Can y'all go to the very first page? of the ITN or what we were sent?
Mhm. That initial timeline?
Yeah, no, the very first page where you kind of give an introduction. Anyway, it's just more of a cleanup. Can y'all go through and just look at it? Because some of the words are together and there's no space between the words. And, you know, if this is going out to the public, we want it to look good, or at least in my version. There were some, there was some grammatical stuff. And then in the section, can you go to section 2, the first A, section A?
Mm-hmm.
I had the second sentence I had trouble with from just a standpoint of, okay, is there a way to make that sentence more clear? I don't know if anybody else did. It may just be my stupidity, but it didn't, it seemed like there were a lot of words there, but it could have been clearer in what we're trying to do.
Under the overview of the solicitation?
Yes.
Okay, we can take a look at that.
And then
may I jump in 1 second, just because
please.
it's related to your comment, Lee? Is that okay?
Yeah.
My suggestion would be that we, given some of the issues that we've all experienced as a community around talking about people as data sources, I would recommend very strongly that we edit the overview of the solicitation to more align with what I think our purpose is, which is to provide a platform for community stakeholders to have their lived experiences and ideas informing the strategies, investments of the trust. I see no reason why we have to refer to anybody as primary data sources. And I think it could be inflammatory.
Pat, could you type that into the chat box so we get your exact?
Yeah, I put in there, should we just send those to Christy? Because I have some other comments like that, but I think right here, going to Lee's purpose to comment too, I feel like right out of the box, that sends a message that people are primary data sources and they're not. They're community stakeholders whose input we want.
If you will, a couple of things, because I agree with whoever made the earlier comment, we're probably not going to get through all of this. As you are reviewing this using the tracking function of the Word document, you can make those comments and send that to me electronically so that we capture it, not only exactly what you're saying, because I think that's a great change, Dr. Snyder, but also so that we're making sure we're getting it exactly where you think it should go.
And then if you'd be kind enough to go down to the review section 5. I think you may have passed it. Okay.
Right above the score. Yeah, okay.
My question is, as far as the weighting and doing some of the things that are on this, why don't we just go with the straight score? Because one of the examples that you gave was really scary. It said, the criterion that it was that maybe their score was lower, but there was an advantage to the trust as far as it didn't cost as much, and that concerns me because just because it costs much, but it didn't get a real high review. I think we want, I think we want the best available product, and the cheapest version would not be necessarily the best thing. So my question is, why is the scoring range in and of itself not sufficient?
So based on my past experience with the funding opportunities, it's never been the case. The committee has always selected the organization that has had the highest score because they met they exceeded all the requirements mainly. So I can't really answer your question about why someone with a low score would actually be recommended for funding. It's just the standard language of the contract or the invitation to negotiate.
Well, if you look in B, Christy, it says criterion with low values favorable to CTAC, proposed price or life cycle cost, the highest, and then it goes on with the explanation. So so what you're saying is usually the scoring range is usually what is utilized in order to determine who's going to end up with your recommendation. Is
Yes,
that what I heard? Okay.
That is how that is the purpose of this ITN. Now, an example of that would have been what happened with Teamworks Alachua. They were awarded funding even though they were one of the lower scoring applicants. So that has happened, but the team, when we train the team, it is mainly based on the score. The teams, that has never happened other than when the board has decided to go a different route.
Okay, but you're putting in here, as I understand it, ways that it's not just the scoring, it's just not the weight of the scoring. A, B, and C are in there, and they're in there for a reason, I would imagine. So it seems like what that does is it gives wiggle room. But if that's not the case, please explain it to me.
It does. I'm sorry, go ahead. It does give that wiggle room if that is ever the case, but that is not the point of having that range there is so that we can utilize that range and identify the applicant that meets or exceeds all the requirements of the invitation to negotiate. It is there to give that wiggle room, but it is there just as an option.
Would Christy, would it be more like if you had two contractors that scored 95 and 96 that you might wait within that group instead of it being you're pulling somebody in the 80 range up into the 90 range?
Could be, yes.
And I guess the other thing that we didn't, it said something about, and this will be my last question for this part. When you were given the timeline and it gave the cone of silence, and the cone of silence actually ended when when I believe when the staff is done with and makes their recommendations. I think that, in my opinion, the cone of silence should go until after the trust board has made their decision.
Okay.
And that's open for debate, because it's in there that and I just think that it could be problematic, and it has ability to undermine what staff has done. If you close the cone of silence, then all of a sudden, people that may disagree. I would like to rely on staff with the information that comes to me, as opposed to potentially being lobbied by people after staff has made recommendation.
I agree with that. So if that is something that the committee would like to see changed, we can do that.
The suggestion we can't vote on, but it's a good suggestion. So,
yeah.
Cheryl, quickly before you go on to Ken and Candace, may I interrupt with just a quick point of timing? I know we initially said this meeting was going to end at 12, and I see that we're over 12. Can we decide how much longer we're going to go so we can prioritize our discussion? Because I feel there are a couple of things that we shouldn't just be sent comments to Christy, like the time frame and other things that we should discuss as a committee. So maybe we need to do some prioritizing based on how long we're going to run them.
Okay. Is everybody okay staying on till 12:30 if we can wrap it up by 12:30?
Yes.
That good for everybody? Do we think we can wrap it up by 12:30? I think, some of the follow-up comments can be sent to Christy if we can't cover every piece. Like if you see anything that is a grammatical issue or you would like the verbiage changed a little bit to be more suited. Those are things that we can definitely send to Christy, and it'll still keep the essence of the ITN in place.
I agree. If there are, grammatical things, because I have not sent it to Ashley yet for formatting and that sort of thing. Those things, if you want to just send that in an email, that's perfect. But those items that we really need to discuss as relates to substance for the scope of services as well as the invitation to negotiate, if we could stick with those, because then I can send that back to Cheryl for additional review before it goes to the board.
Right. And I'm not avoiding Ken and Candace, but I saw Christy needs to leave in 5 minutes. Christy, did you have any comments you wanted to make before you have to jump off?
I think just echoing some of the concerns with the timeline and that jeopardizing the quality of the work. And just even in the 3-week timeline to be accepting applications, like, is that too small of a time frame to get quality submissions?
If I may address the timeline for the submissions, when meeting with the chair as well as Kathryn, we thought that with the type of vendors that we would be approaching, or not approaching, but interested in this type of work, that 3 week, I think it was maybe 2.5, 3 weeks would be well enough time for them, since it was a different type of funding opportunity, not necessarily programmatic. So we did think that timeline would work well for this type of organization.
Can you have your hand up?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'll keep my comments brief. If we could turn to Appendix C, which has been the discussion of the timeline. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it. Put it in the chat. But I think on a timeline, if we put the community listening data right there, if we change the due date from September, October to 2022 to just say fall, August through December 2022, that gives us a lot more flexibility. Initial findings due January 2023 with a final February 2023. That would be my recommendation. If we could go back to.
And can we hold it? Can we discuss that point actually? Because I think we should discuss it. And as the facilitator of the process, I am like completely in agreement with you that having more time for this data collection is better. What we were bumping up against is that initially the board said that they wanted, we wanted to have they wanted to have the plan approved to link with the budgeting process. So that means February and March. So this is, I think, something we need to discuss. And if we can take a minute, Cheryl, to do that, to see what does this committee feel? I think it's a great idea, just realizing then that it's going to push back the development of the plan, but maybe the committee is willing to, meet more frequently for a couple of months to minimize that impact. So there's a few things for you all to discuss and consider. I'd like to hear people's thoughts.
Candace, I see your hand up, and I know you were concerned about the timeline as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Kathryn, that you're being responsive to the charge given about time, essentially the deadline. And that's always a problem, I think, unfortunately. However, having said that, I was pleased to see Ken's recommendation about some revisions to the timeline. I also think that I disagree with Christy that 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks is appropriate for a proposal development. I think that's wrong. This project is going to require a lot of different research or public contact modalities, and that's difficult work. It's going to take some time to figure out how to do that cost effectively. So I would certainly extend that timeline beyond 2.5 weeks. Also, this is again timeline related. Looking at the Hillsborough thing that you sent us, they allowed in there, because it was an 8-month timeline for them, so way different than what you're proposing. But they had a piece in there about meeting with staff this would be CTAC staff, to review progress, et cetera. And I think that's really valuable, there's a time that you kind of stop and say, okay, what have we got so far? What are we missing? And what can we do to get that? So that also extends the timeline. And then my last point is that it's unclear to me from the ITN whether you're asking for the vendors to use all of the modalities that you've listed: survey, focus group, community meetings, which I guess is Hillsborough called town halls, expert interviews. All of those take time, especially doing a survey. So I would suggest potentially losing one of those, like not asking for a survey, for example. That takes away what people might consider to be a quantitative information source. But the problem is, in this short timeline, you're likely to have a very low response rate. So the survey information might not be very meaningful. So that might be one way to, Kathryn, to help adjust the timeline, is that if you didn't have to do quite as much, 4 different modalities, that might help make the process a little shorter.
And I think one of the things that when we were talking and putting this all together, we wanted to throw out a wide net, but then let the contractor really tell us, we figure they're really the experts. And so for them to come back with their proposal to say, this is how we could accomplish what we think you need. And so it wasn't, I don't think, and Kathryn, you can correct me, I don't think it was necessarily that they'd have to use every one of those data sources. We wanted to give them as examples of the data sources that were possible, and then have them tell us, this is how we could do it, and provide you with a comprehensive, resource that you will be able to use moving forward with your strategic planning.
So I understand that, but I think that needs to be made clear in the ITN. My impression was that you were asking for everything.
And Candace, a really good point. If you all do not ask for surveys, that does facilitate a shorter time frame. And again, it goes back to what are the best methods in different populations. Like I could see maybe doing a provider survey, that might be a population that a survey would be appropriate for. But looking to the applicants to propose based on their experience. But we'll make that clear. I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. But I will say, and I've been involved in a lot of community projects like this, that there's been a survey, and even when you target it to providers, you generally have a very, very low response rate.
Correct. Yeah.
Especially in this timeline, this kind of time frame.
Ken, you have your hand up?
Yeah, well, I what I'm hearing is, and I believe Lee kind of made this point, we're not interested, and I said we're trying to get to the budget. The budget cycle for 2023 is presented to us by June so this time next year. If while we're doing this listing, we need to extend the listing, or the contractor comes back and says, I'm not ready to give you what I think the community's saying, then to me, that's the most important thing. Not that we rush the listing, but that we get it right. And so, if the due date of fall, August through December, needs to be extended, then maybe what we do is we put in the ITN that we're open to that, it's more, I mean, I like having due dates, right? But if 4 months is not enough time, then we just need to push everything back.
Well, and we did that with the Children's Services Advisory Council. When we did that original community assessment,
Right.
we had an expectation of a certain timeline. And as the process progressed, they would come back to us periodically and say, we need a little bit more time to pull that data together. And it did extend the project quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, I think we're open to an adjustment. Again, I think from the beginning, we've talked about we'd rather have a quality project done than a fast project.
Yeah. Well, I would like us to to ask for them to bring back a plan that gives them 4 months of listening, which is August through December, 4.5 months, with initial findings by January and a comprehensive report by February, but maybe have a qualifying in there that this may need to be extended, with approval through the board or something like that. Do you want to stay on this topic, or because I have some evaluation criteria?
I have one more question on that topic, and I thank you, Bishop Stokes, for your comment saying that you'd be willing to meet more frequently if needed at that back end. If just even by a shake of the head, especially if I could do it virtually, shorter virtual sessions, because then what I can do is try to rework the timeline to condense a little bit more of our back end work, so we don't get too much further than the final endpoint that we have. But shake of the head, is that something that people? Okay, so I'll work with Christy and Cheryl on the timeline to. I think what I'm hearing is. Again, shake of the head is fine. Everyone would like more time for data collection. Yes, shake of the head is good. Okay. And then I'll work on condensing a little bit our more frequent meetings on the back end, so the impact is minimized. And then a point of one other, if I may, as facilitator preference, one other thing I think we really need to discuss that's not in this ITN that was in one of the samples is whether you want to set a maximum budget not to exceed amount. I think that will really help. I'm seeing lots of head shake. Yes, we have nothing in there. Otherwise, you're going to get at $50,000 proposals, $150,000. So if you want to set a maximum, we need, what's the number? And some of you have experience with these projects. What kind of number should we be putting in the ITN as a, budgets not to exceed X dollars?
Christy, what did we initially talk about on that?
We didn't. The board did not set an amount for this.
I remember a $50,000. Is that not right?
I think there was a discussion about how much it could potentially cost, but there was no set amount. I do recall there being a discussion about what this could cost the trust, but we didn't set anything.
Well, I'm comfortable for 50 to 100. That's the range I mentally was thinking of. Maybe that's way too small. I don't know.
I think, Ken, that it's definitely going to be higher than 50 for what all you're asking for. So, and maybe 100. Well, I think 100 would be a realistic top barrier. I also think that you're not going to get a lot of applicants for this. One of your criteria about experience in Alachua County is right away going to eliminate a lot of people or a lot of organizations. So, if you only get 2 proposals, and they're both, anyway, you understand what I'm saying. There's not going to be a lot to choose from. So you got to give them some flexibility.
I think a maximum of 100 is good. And do you all want to eliminate the requirement that they have prior work experience in Alachua to open up the applicant pool?
I think that is somewhat dangerous.
Okay.
I think that they need to have Alachua County, but they might be able to buy that with some PRN people. Like and I'm not sure how you word that in a solicitation, but if they come into this without community experience, there's no way they're going to get this done in that timeline, and there's no way that they'll hit it because they won't know what to hit. So anyway,
yeah, that was my point on the evaluation criteria. Are we able to go to that?
Can we talk one more time about just some of the timelines on that timeline chart? I have a couple of things just to consider, kind of following up on Candace's comments and Bonnie's and others in the chat. I wonder, we have, August to December, which I think is great, but why couldn't we ask for just an interim report? That often happens with a lot of contracts that we have. Particularly when you're using these kinds of community stakeholder kinds of input and looking at qualitative data, it often is helpful to see when you've seen themes and you're getting to a point of what we call saturation, where we're hearing similar things over and over again. And so we could be proceeding with some of our activities around other ways of gathering information if we had them, as Cheryl suggested earlier, coming back to the trust and talking about, don't have to be long reports, but just what are some of their initial things that they're hearing in a more iterative way, like between August and December, so that then when
Like preliminary initial findings, so
like
preliminary.
almost like it really is. It's like a series of preliminary initials, right? What we're seeing, are we seeing themes that are recurring? So that's one suggestion we might consider. And then the other, because that would allow the trust to also, and the staff to engage in conversations as well. And then I was just wondering, because I agree with Candace completely about surveys and trying to do surveys in a very limited time period. And we just talked the other day at the board meeting about how fabulous the whole team is doing with their community outreach and that they're in every community. So perhaps this vendor or this respondent could actually work with us to develop a survey, and at various community events, when the trust is already out and about, we could have QR codes, links, hard copies of things, and we could be gathering information that would also be useful for us.
While we're talking about the time thing, Cheryl, can I, we're
So,
focused.
yeah, I'm sorry. Lee, all I was going to just finish with was that would allow us to collect data on an ongoing basis, but also just collect data on an ongoing basis all along, right? For the purposes of this report, but also to be able to continue to use that strategy on an ongoing basis. So.
And I want to also add that, we're focusing on the front end of this, but the back end is the budget and what we're trying to do. And we don't have to come, the budget is, the final approval is in September. And you don't have to have anything set in stone until that final one. So we are going to have some sort of idea by the time we start talking about this in May and June of what probably we're going to need. So at that point, all we really have to do is say, let's kind of budget X amount of dollars for over here and X amount of dollars for over there. And, and then get the specific thing later on as we go along. So we've got more time than we're talking, than I think we have as we go through the budget process, because I think we'll have all of our ducks in a row by the time we have to begin the budget process for the first meeting in September. So, we just want to make sure that we have a good product, and I think everybody's on board that, but I don't think that we need to put additional pressure that we got to do this thing, and have it for the budget, because we got plenty of time to do the budget.
That's a good point. And what would be like the back end timeline? What Pat was talking about as far as getting that preliminary data reported periodically, I think we could, we can start some of our strategic planning while that data is coming in. And so we'll have some trends and some ideas and suggestions that we can begin utilizing in those discussions as well. So it's not like we're stagnant until, the listening project is over, as long as we're hearing from the contractor. Ken, did you have, the three of you still have your hands up? So I just want to
go on the evaluation criteria. Are we ready to move to that? Yes. Okay. So back to kind of Commissioner Pinkerson's point on price. So that price 20, I don't know what that means. Does it mean the lower the price, the higher the score? How do you get 20 points on the bottom?
So when the evaluation team is reviewing each section for the criteria, they will assign different points. And then there's a formula that the trust uses to determine what that final score would be. And so the way you get 20 points is based on how well you present that information. So for an example, for price, if we set a max and the applicant's price exceeds that, as the evaluation team is reviewing what they submitted, they would receive a lower score. So it's all, we have a formula that we use to finalize scores, if you will, for each.
Okay, so for example, then, Christy, if we said in here, the proposal should come back to us, but not exceed 100,000. And they came back and it was 98,000. Would they get 20 points here, or would they
They would get 20 points there.
Okay, so, and then if they came back and they said, we can't do it for less than, I mean, why would they submit it if they submitted it for 120,000? Wouldn't they just not submit it?
Hopefully they wouldn't. Right.
Yeah, so okay, so I think that if that's what it is, I think 20% of the score is too high. I mean, that's kind of like just submit it. I would move some of that up into experience and project plan.
And I think the budget also needs to be reviewed for the, how realistic do we feel it is? The adequate, do they have expenses accounted for so that they're not then saying, well, we didn't budget for this, we didn't budget for that. Because they're, getting people to participate, engaging people, there are costs to that. So I think it shouldn't be just the price, but also like what is in the budget and the appropriateness of the budget.
Well, that's different then. So, and I agree with that point. If we say appropriateness of the budget and how they're paying for like subcontractors versus staff versus outsourcing surveys, and that is an evaluation mechanism, then that, I like that, and maybe 20 points is appropriate. But if it's just they get the 20 points if they submit it below the price, I don't like that.
So maybe I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's my only question on that.
I wanted to bring to your attention that there are a couple areas within the price that would be considered as the review team is assigning a score, and that's the personnel costs, the travel expenses, any of those other courses and the costs, and then the final fixed price. So it's not just that was just one example. And the scores are weighted, and under that scoring description, I want to go back to the formula where they're looking at the actual rating divided by the highest subjective rating, and then that's how they get that weighted score. We can play around with the weighted score if you guys would like to, but there's a whole formula that determines what that final weighted score would be, which would equal out to that 100.
Okay.
I just want to bring up that we're at 12:29. Do we want to extend the meeting 10 more minutes to finish up, or what is the will of the group?
Yeah, I'm okay. My last point, Cheryl, is I just want to say that I think that there needs to be some local expertise because of what happened with the Teenscape. And so I conclude my comments.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Yes,
Go ahead, Kathryn.
I have one quick one. As I was reviewing again the evaluation criteria, I think that more points should be allocated to the project plan. Currently, we only have 20 out of 100, and I think that project plan is central. So I would suggest moving points out of past experience, which is at 40, and moving that into project plan, because there is a correlation between those, I think. And then I think we do need to talk, so that's my one point. And then the final point I think we need to talk about as a group is the system mapping piece, because it's really not described in the scope, but we do have something here in the evaluation. So I don't know if we're just going to take that out of this proposal. So those are two separate points.
And I think we had discussed that it would be wonderful if they could include system mapping, but it may not be doable with, this project.
I want to comment on that. I'm sorry. That was one of my things that I had circled. I believe, wasn't there a system mapping RFP out before that nobody responded to?
That is correct.
And there was a reason why they didn't respond. Part of it was the price, and part of it was the timeline. That kind of project is hard to do, and there's a very specific methodology for people to do it. So frankly, I would lose that for sure.
Thank you, Candace. Anybody else? Any other area we need to cover on this? I think we've given, my hope would be that, this discussion doesn't stop when we hang up today, go ahead and, look it over with a critical eye. And if you find other areas that are of concern, everybody just, put your comments together and send those to Christy and copy Kathryn. And then hopefully that they can go ahead and make adjustments. Again, what my question is on the back end, I know we're talking about giving more time. What would be that cutoff date that we would have to have the final project presented in order to really incorporate that into a final strategic plan that could
Cheryl?
be utilized for the funding?
Cheryl, I'm going to rework this, but I'm thinking June is very doable. And I think it was either Ken or Lee's point that it's not like we're not going to know what's in the plan until that moment, right? So there will be information and people can be thinking about that. So I'm going to shoot for reworking this by June. And I also really want to know is when does Christy need everybody's comments? Because I know we're on a deadline to get this to the board so it can get released. Christy, when do you need people's comments?
I'm looking at the calendar. Give me 1 second. So I need everyone's comments by the end of this week. Is today? By the end of this week is when I need everyone's comments so that I can make changes and then send back to Kathryn and Chair Twombly.
Is that doable with everyone? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we went over a few minutes. Let me go back to, are there any public comments submitted?
No, they're not.
Okay. And any committee members have any final comments they'd like to add?
Looking forward to working with everybody. It's gonna be great.
Thank you. Christy's team, Kathryn, you guys were rock stars. It was back, you just don't know the back and forth 100 times, but we wanted to get something and we knew you all would have some great input on this. So thank you all for the great suggestions, because I think it's going to make this a stronger document. Okay, I don't think we have a follow-up meeting actually scheduled yet. So we'll talk about that. Christy, I know you'll be working on finalizing based on the comments, and will that be sent back out to the group for a final review for any final comments or it'll just go before the board?
So I need to look at all the comments. If there are comments that are contradicting each other, like if one member wants to extend it this way and the other one, I'm going to have to figure out how to best make that work. I may need to call individuals and have a conversation, or Chair Twombly, I just might let you decide. So,
oh, the pressure. Well, just if we could put all the comments together, and then maybe you, Kathryn. Oh, that's the other thing. I am leaving Friday to go out of the country. So if we could talk, I will still be available to talk Friday. I'm not actually leaving until Saturday. So I would be willing, even though I'll be traveling, maybe Friday late afternoon for us to talk about what you've seen or what you've received.
Okay, I need to get on your schedule then for Friday.
Okay.
Okay, I'll send you some suggested times.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Well, thank you all for your extra time. We wouldn't be us if we didn't go over, so.
And I just want to make sure Ashley is saving the chat so we capture all that. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting you.
Thank you. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.